An identity crisis can be many things. Losing your sense of purpose, a midlife crisis, returning to civilian life, or simply feeling like you don't belong. My life has been one ongoing identity crisis after another. I've started this podcast to help deal with my own demons and negative self-talk, and to ultimately and hopefully learn that I'm not alone, and that these thoughts and feelings aren't unique to me. So if this helps you too, then one by one we can come together, heal ourselves, and move forward with our goals and dreams with a sense of belief, happiness, and purpose. Hi, welcome back to the Identity Crisis Podcast. I am Jay Newts, and I have a very special guest today. He is an award-winning Australian film director. He's produced some incredible movies. Mr. Matthew Holmes, how are you, sir?
Hello, I'm very good, and thank you for having me on today.
Wonderful. It's great to have you here. Now, tell me, you've produced some wonderful movies, and we'll talk about them. You've done Twin Rivers, The Legend of Ben Hall, The Cost, and you're working on another big project now, which is I'm really eager to hear about. Talk to me about how you actually got into filmmaking. What was the inspiration?
Look, I think the earliest inspiration for getting into movies, I didn't have access to TV as a child. We grew up in a family where we didn't have television except on weekends, and so I didn't have a lot of exposure to TV. So when I finally started seeing some movies, they affected me quite profoundly because I'd never seen anything quite like it, you know. So, but I think for me, the switch to wanting to make movies was probably when I saw movies like Ben-Hur and Gallipoli as a teenager.
Classics.
And I just thought, I think I just got very, very interested in the process. I was very interested in cartooning and drawing back then, and so I got into animation and things like that. But yeah, I think I distinctly remember being 13 years old and really wanting to make a movie about Ned Kelly. And I think from that point on, I always had a camera in my hand, and whether it was plasticine people or using my brothers and sisters as my actors in home movies, I was making movies from that age on.
It's very, very sort of Spielberg-like. I remember listening to an interview with him talking about the same thing. He just used to go out there and make, small war movies with his 8mm camera. So you've sort of had a very similar experience from a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. I was rounding up cousins and school friends, and we were running around making war movies, Star Wars rip-offs, anything we could. I was doing that, and I did that all through my teenagers and into my 20s as well. So, yeah, it's very similar. I think the desire was there from the earliest age.
You've told me before that you actually used to do stop motion. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I got into stop motion animation. Like I said, I was into drawing and cartoons and things like that. So I got into doing stop motion animation because I was really interested in the animation and stuff that they did in Star Wars and all the Ray Harryhausen movies. I was really interested in that side of things, and so I actually got into stop motion animation. I did that for school projects, and I ended up getting a job at an animation company in Adelaide, where I worked at for 15 years. I started as the floor sweeper, straight out of high school. Sort of hanging around and doing whatever I could there, and ended up becoming a full-time, key animator. And I worked on TV commercials for about a decade. So.
It just goes to prove that
that's certainly been part of my career.
Dedication will get you anywhere, won't it?
Well, it's certainly one of the ingredients that you need. You're certainly not going to get far without it. I don't know if it's the only ingredient that will make you succeed, but it is certainly, I think, a component in the engine that you must have. Otherwise, you're definitely going to be grounded. So,
absolutely. Now, listen, just talk to me, for those people who are thinking, what the hell does stop motion mean? Because, these days it's more rare than it used to be, because everything these days is going CGI. What is stop motion? Yes. What's involved, and how long is the process?
Well, stop motion animation is when you take an object that you can photograph and you move it and take a photograph of it, one frame at a time. So it tends to be used for, clay animation, Wallace and Gromit, rubber puppets, things like that. So it's not a process of drawing a character and making the move, and it's not a process of using the computer. You're literally using something that you can photograph on a table or, a model or something like that. So it's a frame by frame manipulation, to make something move. So yeah, that's stop motion animation.
So basically, it would take you an entire day to shoot 1 second worth of footage.
It can do in some cases. It really depends on what you're animating and how complex it is. Sometimes you may only get through a few frames a day, and sometimes you might get through 5 or 6 seconds a day. It really can depend on whatever it is you're doing. So, but as a general rule, it takes a very, very long time. It's really no different to CGI. CGI films take just as long to make as stop motion films. It's just that now computer animation is just the more favored thing to do. Stop motion has its limitations as well, and it also has a certain sort of antiquated look. I don't do stop motion animation anymore. I haven't done it for a good 12, 13 years. I've sort of let all that go. There's not a lot of jobs and opportunity for it. And I sort of reached a point in my career where I was either going to go take the next step into stop motion and start working on Hollywood movies as an animator and so on, or I was going to go into making movies with real people. And that's where my heart was really into making movies with actors
and
real sets.
Is that where Twin Rivers was born as such?
Yes, very much so. I mean, I was always making films with my brothers and sisters and friends on video on weekends for fun, but that's where I went, no, I'm going to take this seriously. And that's when Twin Rivers came about. And I started filming that in that year 2001. And then by 2007, it was complete.
That's a very long process. It's a huge process.
It was a 6 years.
So let's talk about that movie in detail. How long did it take you to write the script, or did you write one? Did you just make it up as you went along? Being your first feature movie, how was the process for that?
Well, I didn't really know in one sense what I was doing. I was really sort of going along with this. I'm not I didn't really have a great plan. I started off as I was going to make a short film, and I wrote a script for that. And then we just started adding scenes to it, and it got bigger and it got bigger and it got bigger over the years. And I would bring in other people to help me write it. And before long, we went, oh, stuff it. We're just making a full feature film now. And so we were actually writing the script and attaching new characters and writing new endings and writing new beginnings and everything as we were filming it. I was kind of finding my way through it in the dark a bit. I didn't sit down and write a script and then go out and write, and now let's go and film this feature. It was very organic. It changed and morphed over time. And so I sort of learned how to make a feature film sort of by bumbling my way through this very long process and picking up a lot of tips and making a lot of mistakes and Twin Rivers is the end result, for better or worse. But it was really my film school movie. I consider it I didn't go to film school. I didn't do any extra study on film. I just went off and made animation films or made my own features, and that was my school. And I learned to do it by doing it, which is how I prefer to learn to do something anyway.
And I mean, look, I've seen that movie. I actually bought a copy of the DVD from you when you re-released it several years ago. And I mean, to learn that you actually shot the entire thing over 4 years, it was incredible because obviously people aged during that time. But the way that you'd filmed it, the way that the actors kept just portraying each scene as it went on, I never would have thought it would have been a 4-year project. Possibly maybe a year or thereabouts, especially like an indie movie. You think, oh yeah, not a big budget, everyone's got commitments and so forth, so it will take a while to shoot. But 4 years, I mean, how did you manage that? I mean, that's such a long time to be shooting a movie.
Yeah, well, it sort of wasn't by design. Again, it wasn't really by design. If someone told me it was going to take me 4 years, I probably would never have started it. But you end up just in that sort of situation. Like I said, it was a process. The film just kept growing and growing and growing. And so it just how long it took. I mean, we weren't working on it all the time. There were stints where there was a couple of months where we weren't doing anything. But then we could all get back together and film another stuff. And then I would spend another couple of months writing new scenes, and then we'd run off and film that. And I had to work around everybody's schedules because no one was getting paid. It was all weekend stuff. And so a lot of the time I had to wait until there were holidays that we could all come together and do something. So it was sort of born out of just the process of how we were doing it. And it just happened to take 4 years to film when we finally had it all in the can. And then it took me another 2 years to put it all together because, again, it would have only taken me 5 or 6 months to edit, but it took 2 years to do all that because I had no way of actually figuring out how to do it. I mean, this was a time when we didn't have video editing stuff at home. You had to have nearly a professional setup to have that. And I couldn't do sound at home. I just didn't have the money and the equipment for that. And it was not accessible the way it was today. Now I could edit a high definition feature in my bedroom now on a laptop. Back then, that wasn't possible. So I needed a lot of help to get it finished. And fortunately, I did get help. But it took me a long time to get it. And I had to, again, do it in people's spare time and when they're available. This is why it takes so long.
You make an interesting point there, and I suppose in this day and age we do take things for granted because you can shoot 4K on an iPhone these days. You know, you can edit.
That's right.
You can edit, as you say, in a laptop anywhere in the world. Like you can be up in the sky editing, a movie as such. So
that's right.
It is the world has changed.
Those tools
so much.
were not available.
No.
Yeah, it has changed, and filmmakers now. I mean, I look at what we have access to today, and I just bemoan it and go, oh my God, I wish I had this when I was 21. I wish I had this for Twin Rivers, because we were working with such antiquated equipment and lack of equipment. I could have pulled Twin Rivers off in a year or two, the whole thing, if I had just had the access to the equipment. But that kind of was a baptism of fire that kind of, it puts you to and purges you, and you have to make it work despite having no access to tools. So really, filmmakers today, they got no excuse.
No.
They have absolutely no excuse why if they can't shoot a movie, edit it, and go out and learn and make their own features. Many of them are doing it, which is great. But there's no excuse now. The tools of the professional are at everybody's fingertips. So there's certainly no excuse now. You can't let that hold you back now.
No, not at all. Do you think that filmmakers these days put far too much focus on, I need the right camera, the best lighting, rather than basically saying, this is what I've got, I'm just going to go off and shoot a movie?
I don't know enough young filmmakers to make that assessment, so I wouldn't really be able to say one way or another. But what I can observe is that I think people tend to put a bit too much focus on the technical stuff and getting the technical stuff right, whereas I really think that filmmakers need to be focusing more on other technical aspects of filmmaking, which is, storytelling, writing, how to direct actors, how to craft scenes, how to tell a story with film and that medium, rather than, making a cool shot or making something look really awesome or having a fancy camera move or, those sorts of things are tools that you need and all that, but they're not really what films are about. So sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of a focus on the wrong things with young filmmakers. They're focusing on all the cool stuff, the fun stuff, but those things need to be built upon good stories, good scripts, good characters, and those are the things that they probably need to actually learn and study more so than the technicals of cameras. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you can have the most polished image and crisp sound there is, but if, as you say, if the story is lacking, if the performances aren't there, then it's not worth what's been shot on. That's
right. So, but if you have, a fantastic performance looking on, on some sort of badly shot, crummy thing, well, you can probably fix that up, But you can't fix a bad performance. You can't fix a lousy story and a badly told or badly directed movie. No amount of editing or camera tweaking is going to fix that. But you can take an image that's not so great with a great performance on it and tweak that up and probably get something good out of it. So, yeah, I think we got to focus on those. I think filmmakers should focus on those things, knowing that the technical side, they don't have to worry about that anymore. You can shoot it on a phone and you've got enough grading equipment and you've got enough sound equipment now, you can make anything sound good.
Absolutely.
So focus on the other parts of storytelling and filmmaking. And I feel it's a skill that's also kind of being lost even in Hollywood. you look at the scripts that are being written today in Hollywood, and you go, guys, have you forgotten? Got people in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s were writing scripts 10 times superior to what we're seeing today. It's this massive lack of talent.
You're not wrong.
And genuine understanding of craft, of storycraft, and it's just not there anymore. And you think, oh, wow, you've got all these wonderful examples, but these people are not learning anything. Or haven't learned anything.
Hollywood to me these days, because I grew up just like you. I mean, I had inspiration from so many amazing movies like Back to the Future. I remember being so inspired watching movies like that, and not just creativity with the story writing, but the filmmaking process. And these days, in my opinion, they just go, well, we need to keep ourselves in a job, so just make anything, bring anybody into it, push it out there, we'll all get paid, then we'll move on to the next thing. And there doesn't seem to be a huge drive in mainstream Hollywood to do something which is mind-blowingly creative and original. It's just a machine these days, which is sad.
No, it's a machine. It's a big, safe machine pumping out that just in mines intellectual properties. That's all it is.
And remakes.
Yeah, that's it.
The age
just
of
remake
remakes.
this, remake that. Yep.
That's right.
Remake this, retell that, recast that, gender swap that. Do this. It's like, well, where's the new? Where's the innovative? Where's the risk? You know, none of this, what they're doing is risky. And then, they're just box ticking and they're sort of like making facsimiles of movies, almost like copies of films that seem, things that have the appearance and sound of the movie, but really they're just hollow, empty shells. They're not truly great pieces of art, which in the end, you know, as cinema is art.
Of course.
And it involves a lot of artistic disciplines: writing, performance, photography, you know, sound crafting, music. These are all arts, and they all come together into these wonderful pieces of entertainment called movies. And you don't have to say, oh, well, it's not, that's just for art films, because you can look at a commercial film like Lord of the Rings, and there's so much art there. They are works of art. So it doesn't matter whether you're making Predator or whether you're making Terms of Endearment. It's still all craft and art.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Now, what do you think as far as, like, do you think that there is an undermining of filmmakers and original filmmakers when Hollywood rehashes and remakes a movie? Like, for example, I mean, one of my favorite movies is it stars Michael Caine and Steve Martin, and that is Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which I loved, and it came out in 1988. Really wonderful film. And I remember years ago sitting in my lounge room watching Netflix, and my girlfriend chose a movie, and we're like, oh yeah, we'll watch this thing. And we got 5 minutes into it. I'm like, this seems so familiar. And what it was a remake of that movie, but it was the female version, completely different title. They changed the storyline a fraction. And I thought, this is just disappointing, because the original movie, there was nothing wrong with it. It had a great, strong cast, you know, wonderfully funny. And I thought, why have they had to remake this to almost undermine the wonderful movie that went before? Do you feel that that's unfair to the original filmmakers?
I do, but the old film still stands and will always be there, and it will simply show up how bad their effort is. We saw that with the Ghostbusters. You know, when they tried to, I mean, the original Ghostbusters is a classic. We saw the 2016 remake, the all-female remake, and it was a disaster. And now we can simply look and go, oh, well, we can see the classic is the superior thing here. I think they just do a disservice to Hollywood, and they do a disservice to audiences, more so than the original film. And it just shows that they have no respect for what's come before. Because the hubris to go and remake something that doesn't need a remake is just, you know, that's just shocking hubris.
Just part of the machine, isn't it?
Yeah, but they're doing it because we don't, you know, because Hollywood's not run anymore by truly creative people. They stifle creativity. They're run by executives. They're run by bean counters who just read data and make decisions based on data and things like that. And they want low risk. And if they go, oh, that was successful, just rinse and repeat that. That's why that's why films don't feel like art anymore. They feel like products. That's why they call it content. It's just, that's what it is. It's just content. It's just a sausage factory of recycled, reused ideas from far superior people. But of course, Hollywood prances around thinking that they're creating high art and that they're geniuses and fixing all the problems of, all the cinema of the old days. It was all messed up and we've got to correct it. And it's like, well, you're just showing us how good it was with every step they take. They're just showing us how good we had it in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
So I suppose if there was any ambition for you getting into Hollywood when you were a young filmmaker, I'm guessing that your ambition now is to basically sort of be your own industry rather than getting into the machine.
Oh, yeah, I no interest in getting into Hollywood. I did when I was a younger filmmaker. I thought, this is where I want to go. I want to make movies in Hollywood. I dipped my toe in it. I've got a whiff of Tinseltown, and I don't like it. It's a place with a lot of toxic people, and they run things in a certain way, and you lose your creative freedom, and you have to stoop down to become a kind of person that I didn't want to become, and the doors are closed anyway. Like they really don't want me there. I'm not welcome. So, and I don't want to be there anyway. So I really just want to stay in Australia, make films that I'm passionate about. And they're not films they're interested in. So, I'd be very happy just making my own films in Australia and, where I have creative control. I go there, I have to sell my soul, I have to relinquish creativity and I have to sacrifice my passions and my dreams and my art on the altar of fame and low risk taking and having someone else who is far less talented than me tell me how to make my film. It's really it's a no-brainer, really. So
no, yeah, and you make a really good point. I suppose it's just standing your ground and being true to what you want, isn't it?
Yeah, and you've got to do that all the time with a film, especially when there's money involved. You've got to stand your ground, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But hopefully, the more I do it, the more I'll be able to stand and really fight for what I want. Or you just surround yourself with people that support your vision, rather than people that want to compromise it and take it away. But that's the thing. The Hollywood's biggest problem now is because of all the money that is getting entrenched into these things. There's so much at stake, and there's so much fear around the film not making any money. They have to. They do get controlling because what if it fails? There's too much money. So that's just not a place I want to be in. I don't want to be responsible for $200 million that belongs to the studio. It's absurd. It's too much just way too much responsibility, and films shouldn't have to cost that much, And in the changing landscape now, where films just can't make money, it's so hard to make a film turn a profit, and it's harder than it's ever been. I think we really need to put the brakes on and make cheaper movies, make better films for less money. I totally believe it's possible to make better films much cheaper than what we're doing.
Well, I guess that's where the indie market over the past few years, especially with streaming, has really come into its own. Like you look at like Amazon Prime, you can independent movies and so forth can be uploaded there. You got Tubi and many other outlets as well. They're finally giving a platform for independent and low budget movies to actually have an audience rather than just being watched by the cast and crew and their friends.
Yeah, that's true. They are giving them the audience. I won't deny that. But what they're not giving the filmmakers is money. Very, very hard to get money out of these services. Tubi, you might be able to get some, but the streaming services, they may offer these movies as content, but the filmmaker is still getting screwed. So the filmmaker's not getting anything out of it, which is very different to the old days with the rental market, VHS, DVD, cable TV, and all these things. These things are all either gone or reduced to such a low level now they're kind of insignificant. And streaming has come along and sort of kneecapped the whole industry from the top to the bottom, from the independents to the big studios, and changed the landscape so much by devaluing content, by offering it for so cheap. Buffet style 24 hours a day content for $10 a month. I mean, they're now realizing that it's not sustainable, and movies cost a lot more to make than, when you're giving it away that cheap. It used to be you wanted 4 hours of entertainment on a Saturday night, you had to rent 2 VHS tapes, that cost you $12, and you had to do it every weekend if you wanted it. Now, for $12, you've got your entire month covered, 24 hours a day.
And you can watch hundreds of movies.
That's right. So they have literally offered it up virtually for free, and they wonder why, we can't make films make money anymore. Why is the streaming bubble burst? Why aren't films making any money? And it's like, because you gave it all away for free. You let the genie out the bottle. Content used to have a cost. Movies used to have a price tag, and you had to pay for it unless you wanted to pirate it. And the internet made that real easy. And but it used to have value. You know, films cost what they cost, and they could and careers could be supported, and wages and royalties could be paid to filmmakers so they could live their lives and be filmmakers. And now most filmmakers or people who even work in the industry have to take on second jobs and work in the downtime. And that's what all these strikes we just saw in Hollywood were all about. You know, they're because all the royalties are gone, and people and writers and directors and actors are going, hang on, how do I pay the bills? When there's no work on, because there's no royalty checks anymore. So streaming came along and changed the landscape. And while there's benefits, like you said, now there is an audience for independent filmmakers to get their films out there. There's no revenue. Very hard to get revenue. So we're still trying to figure that one out.
It's also a bit difficult when we're living in a society these days where everybody expects a lot of content for nothing. I mean, you can buy a song on iTunes for 99 cents or $1.60 or thereabouts. It's so cheap, or in some cases it's free. Like, you can listen to Spotify for free if you're willing to put up with some ads. And I think people these days are so used to free content that if you go, you need to pay $5 to rent this movie for 24 hours on YouTube, for example, people go, no, I just won't bother.
That's right. That's the genie that got let out of the bottle. We conditioned an entire generation to expect this. And unfortunately, they also expect movies that are flashy and loud and big and fun and, you know, full of special effects and things that will hold their attention. And those kind of movies cost a bucket ton to make, but they don't make a hell of a lot of return unless they are heavily marketed. They're based on intellectual property that people are already familiar with. And low risk, familiar, lowest common denominator, you know, it's going to please everybody, you know, and so you end up with this generic, banal crap that sort of appeals to everybody and appeals to nobody. So, it's a bit of a sorry state of affairs, and I think Hollywood is, they're suffering the effects of it at the moment, as we see massive layoffs across studios having to buy each other out and consolidate, and it's just it's a very tricky time for filmmakers right now. We're certainly in the eye of a storm. So one who wants to get into the film industry better just get ready for it. Just know what you're getting into, and certainly don't get into the industry. If there's anything else you'd rather be a vet, you'd rather be a doctor. If there's anything else you've got an interest in, go do that. Don't do films. Because it's you better love it to your core, because if you don't, it'll kill you. The industry will kill you.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the. I think anything in entertainment is very similar, but I mean, as you say, the changing landscape of the movie industry, it's in some ways, as you say, it's soul crushing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and you can never keep up. And just when you think you've gotten ahead, it changes again. It's constantly shifting, and that's part of the problem that I've had. I've been going at this career for almost 30 years now, trying to break in and trying to make it a paid job, and I'm still not quite there. I'm nearly there, but I'm still here 30 years later, still slugging it out, trying to make this my job. And in that time, I've seen it just change so much. You know, I've seen it go from VHS to streaming, and I've been trying to be a filmmaker in all of these different incarnations of the industry, and every year it just seems to get harder. And you've got to rethink your approach, and you've got to, it's like I said, it's killer. You've really got to love it to stick with it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Let's move on to some happier subjects. I just want to wrap up on Twin Rivers. After you'd shot it for 4 years, you did the post production for 2 years or so. You had a premiere at a cinema with your cast and crew in Adelaide. Talk to me about that process and how you felt watching your movie, all that hard work, as on, they say, the big silver screen. No,
it was great. It was, it's always rewarding. That's the fun. Showing your finally showing your film to an audience, that's the fun part. It's always the part of the process I love, especially if you're proud of the film, and you're willing to show people. It is great, but it's only it's a short-lived moment, but a very good one. So I wish I could do it more, because it is a fun part of it. But it's a long time between films. It usually ends up being anywhere between 7 and 10 years between each movie. So it's something I wish I could do more of is those premieres, because they are fun.
Well, it's you made an interesting point there about films every 10 years. So according to your IMDb Pro profile, the Twin Rivers was released in 2007, and then your next major movie, which was a bigger budget, bigger equipment, and production value through the roof, was 2017, which of course was The Legend of Ben Hall. Let's talk about that. What inspired that particular movie, and how did that come about after Twin Rivers?
Well, like I said, I always wanted to make an Ed Kelly movie, and from the age of 13, and I wanted to make it, but then they had made a Ned Kelly movie while I was making Twin Rivers. They brought out the Heath Ledger one. And I was bemoaning this to a friend, and after I'd made Twin Rivers, and I was looking for what to do next, and they said, well, there's a lot more interesting bushrangers out there than Ned Kelly. Look into Ben Hall. So I looked into Ben Hall and fell in love with that story, and I started writing that script straight after Twin Rivers. And I had a draft ready to go by 2009 of Ben Hall. And it just and I tried to get it funded, but everybody told me you'll never get this film made as your second movie. It's too expensive, it's too big, it's too ambitious, you'll never get it off the ground. So I put it on the shelf and thought I would make that in 30 years' time when I'm a grey old man and maybe I've got a career. But I intended I would make it. But then a few years after, I was trying to get several other movies up. So for 10 years, between Twin Rivers and Legend of Ben Hall, I was not resting on my laurels. I was fervently trying to get another film financed. And I had several films that I was trying to get up and running. I just couldn't get them off the ground. And out of frustration, because it had been so many years since I'd directed something, my friend said, well, why don't we just go make a short film together? What do you feel passionate about? And I said, well, why don't I take a few scenes from that Ben Hall script that I wrote and go and make a Ben Hall short film. So much like Twin Rivers, it started as a short film, and I crowdfunded it, and I happened to get a lot of interest and money and some great people involved. And then before you know it, we were like, well, why don't we just keep going and make this a feature as well? So history repeated itself with Twin Rivers, and Legend of Ben Hall was born, but just with better cameras, a lot more crew, a lot more actors, and just a lot more professionalism overall. So it was a bit of a rinse and repeat of the old Twin Rivers in principle. It didn't take 2 years. It took 3. It took 3 years. So I halved the time.
Wow. And is that shooting or just the entire production?
The entire production. I started in 2014, released in the beginning of 2017. So, yeah, about 2.5 years.
That's amazing. So what was it like to actually go from, let's face it, as you say before, just, a very small set with the cheapest cameras you could get your hands on in your spare time for Twin Rivers. What was it like to jump into, because you shot that on Red, didn't you, Ben Hall? Yeah,
that was shot on Red, yeah. So it felt better. Like, it's wonderful to have all these new toys, and, the digital revolution had brought up cameras and equipment to such a high level in that decade. We'd moved light years ahead in equipment. So that was wonderful. Having a crew was good, because Twin Rivers was basically shot by me and a couple of mates. I had no film crew. It's just a very home movie. And so it was wonderful to be working with, to be directing with a professional crew and everything. So, but it also really felt very familiar as well. It did have a bit of an indie homemade film feel to it. We were playing with bigger and better, more expensive toys. And I wasn't really getting paid for Ben Hall, so I didn't, and neither was anybody else working on it. We were all doing it for free, so it also had a bit of that feeling to it as well. So
it's amazing. I mean, because I've watched the film several times. I think it's an incredible film. I also know that what I've seen is is the shorter version of what you originally shot. I mean, for example, one of my friends, he's a friend of both of ours actually, Pete Flaherty, he was in the movie, but of course his scenes were cut for the final edit when the movie was released. So there must have been a lengthy movie that was then condensed to be the released movie.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the script was my original Ben Hall script was huge, and I ended up just taking out the final third of that Ben Hall script and then turned that third into the new feature, The Legend of Ben Hall.
Wow.
Which only looked at the last 9 months of Ben Hall's life. My original script looked at his whole life. This version only looked at the last 9 months of his life, and even that was very ambitious and complicated. And we shot for altogether 11 weeks of filming for Ben Hall, which is huge for a short film. Most short films shoot in 3 or 4 weeks. We shot over 11 weeks, spread out over a year's time, but still 11 weeks worth of shooting. And when we came to it, we had a movie that was at least an hour longer than the release version, which was already 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And I had nearly a 3.5 hour version. And so I had to take another hour out of that movie. Which was such a pain. There were so many wonderful scenes and so many great actors like Peter that I just had to cut this scene. I had to cut them because I couldn't fit them into the movie. I already still cop grief for the movie being as long as it is. I had to fight tooth and nail for it to be over 2 hours.
Which is odd because these days audiences are used to movies that run for at least 2 hours. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, a 2 hour movie was something different, whereas these days it's almost the norm. So why was there such a backlash?
That's right.
Why was there such a backlash for a 2 hour movie?
It's a weird old way of thinking, and it should matter even less with streaming because you can pause it and go to the toilet. You can go get a coffee. And that is why it's such a strange phenomenon. This running time is such a big issue. I think it comes from the old TV days where they wanted a movie or they wanted a cinema movie or a TV movie to be a certain length so they can put a certain number of ads in or so they can run it a certain amount of times a day at the theatre. That's where this running time thing really comes from. But at Ben Hall, it didn't really apply because it was only going to be on cinema for a very, very short time, for a very limited audience, and it was going to find its life on streaming where runtime is irrelevant. So, and it was part of why I fought so hard to have it be as long as it was. Unfortunately, I had a producer in Russell Cunningham that supported my vision and allowed me to bring that movie in at 2 hours 15 when I had everyone trying to make it. I had everyone telling me to make it 90 minutes. So, yeah, it's that was fun. Go ahead.
I've watched the movie several times, and to me, it doesn't feel like it's a long chore watching this thing going, when's it going to end? Whereas I have watched other movies. In fact, I'm not too sure if you saw this one. There's a movie called Mr. Turner, and it's basically it's a British film, and it's all about Turner the artist. And
I think I started watching it.
Yeah, I think it went for almost 2.5 hours or thereabouts. And I was sitting in the audience, and I was just waiting for the movie to this is now the big thing that happens, the catalyst which now springs forward into the next thing. And nothing ever happened. And whilst the acting was amazing, it's Timothy Spall as Mr. Turner, and the cinematography is incredible, the locations, the sets, everything is amazing. It was the most boring thing I've ever sat through. And I said to my girlfriend, I said, look, I just want to leave. I just want to get up and go. And I think the whole audience felt that. And then after a while, the movie just ended. And we're like, well, yeah, creatively, that was a wonderful piece of art, but it was so boring to watch. Whereas Ben Hall, it tells a great story. It's compelling. It's full of action. As I said, you don't feel like you've sat there for just over 2 hours watching a movie because it doesn't drag out like some others do. Yeah,
I guess there's stakes, there's stakes and problems and obstacles throughout that the characters have to overcome, and I guess that's part of knowing your story and knowing how to tell that story. If your audience is disengaging, you're either telling the wrong story or you're telling the story wrong, and so therefore that's part of being a filmmaker is learning how to tell a story and to keep your audience's attention and to know when enough's enough. And to know when to go, this should be a 2 hour film. This shouldn't be a 3 hour epic. And actually knowing when something should be a 3 hour epic, when someone's trying to tell you it should be 90 minutes. I knew the Ben Hall story really should have been a 3 hour movie. I felt like it had the scope, the weight, the characters, the stakes, and it had all that to be a 3-hour movie. And I really hope I get the opportunity and the finance one day to actually do my director's cut of Ben Hur, because I think people will see a very different movie. That was edited by somebody else. I had a lot of conflicts there. I had a lot of pressure from people trying to, make the film different and tell a different story to what I really wanted. And so the Legend of Ben Hur film, while I'm very proud of the film, I still don't feel like it's really the movie I set out to make. And I think the director's cut, with all that and those missing scenes, the 3-hour version, that's the version I really want to tell. That's the version that I really hope I get to make one day. And, if I end up becoming a wealthy, successful filmmaker with a couple extra $1 million, I'm going to sink $100,000 into recutting and reposting, that version of Ben Hur.
Well, I mean, look, it's a passion project, so it's not like you're not going to rest until it's done, basically, are you?
No, and believe me, as soon as I've got the money, I'm going to do it myself, and because I want to show and share the world that version of Ben Hur. I'm glad they got this version that they can watch, and I know a lot of people really love it and enjoy it, which is great. But I think there's a better version, there's a better film there. I just got to get it out.
So I guess there's a difference between doing that story justice, or any story justice. There's a difference between that and having something going on for a long time just for the sake of it. I mean, when I made my movie, The Party Bus, my producer, when we watched the first cut, she said to me, listen, this scene, they're great scenes, great acting, so forth. However, it doesn't drive the story forward. So I would suggest if you cut these scenes, it's not going to affect the overall movie. Yes, it's going to shorten it by 10 to 15 minutes or however long it may be, but you need to focus on the story. What is the main story? And anything that sort of doesn't carry it forward should be cut. Now, in a situation like Ben Hur, as you said, there's a lot of stuff that was cut which explains and drives the story further forward. And I guess that's the difference between filmmakers who go, oh no, I need to make this longer to be more of a feature. I think it's important that the story has to be the most important thing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, it should be. And you've got to have the wisdom as a filmmaker to sacrifice, as they say, kill your babies, kill your darlings, and cut some scenes that you really think are great in and of themselves and that you're already passionate about, but they don't. If they're actually hurting your movie, you've got to cut them out. And I've made cuts in other movies, and in some of the scenes that I did drop out of Ben Hur, I go, I needed to drop that scene. I didn't need it. But what that taught me is I probably shouldn't have written it. Now I'm a better script writer, because now I've learned, having gone through a movie and cut an hour out of it, I'm a better script writer now, because when I'm writing the script, I'm going, I judge every scene. Do I really need that scene? Do you really need to go out and shoot that movie? Or that's part of the movie? How can you do this more economically? So you don't have to make those hard choices when you go to the editing room next time. So, again, you just become a better filmmaker by going through that process. I mean, in a perfect world, and I think I might have even suggested, I said to them, well, why don't you let me do my 3-hour director's cut, and then we'll do a 2-hour cut down and show the 2-hour version at cinemas, and then the 3-hour version will just be for everything else. I would have been very happy with that, and I would have sacrificed even more babies for the theatrical cut if I knew that my director's cut was the one that would endure and be seen on streaming. But I wasn't able to, we didn't have the finances to make 2 cuts, so I had to sort of go in the middle. Because I understand that, for some people, they're not going to want to watch a 3-hour Ben Hur film. They're going to want to watch the 2-hour Cannes version and go, okay, I get the story, I enjoyed that, and move on. But then there are some people who are going to just relish every moment and want to know more about all the characters and more about the story, and those are the people who are going to want that version. So, yeah. So now I'm just going to go in. I'm just going to have in my contract now that if I want a director's cut, I'll make sure there's always going to be a director's cut. But if you need to cut it down for, for theatre or whatever, I'd be willing to do that as long as I get my director's cut.
And I suppose the thing is, as you make more movies and you get more into the industry, you start to have more creative control of this is what I want, this is what I don't want. You learn as you keep going forward, don't you?
Exactly. Yeah. And, and the more you prove yourself as a filmmaker, the more trust you're given and so on. So, yeah, that's just part of the process. But, these are all things, every film I make is just a massive learning curve. It's a cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. These things really are learning curves. And you learn more from your mistakes on on your film, on going out and making films than you do, the things you did right. And,
Absolutely.
that's why it's so important for people just to go out and do it, because you can sit there on the sidelines like a movie critic or a film school student and throw all the theory up and point at all the people that did it wrong and say this is how they stuffed up. But until you go and do it yourself and actually physically figure out how to make a film, you've kind of got no right to sort of point, because that's where the real learning is. And that's when, you've done it. You know how hard it is to make a movie.
Oh, absolutely.
You've done that. You've taken the plunge where many haven't and many couldn't. And you know what it's like. It is a really taxing thing to do. It's much harder than anyone really gives people credit for.
Yeah, definitely. And whilst you have a lot of fun doing it and you're proud of it, by the time it's over, as you said previously, you see, right, this is the final product, but that joyous moment is short-lived, especially from the filmmaker's point of view, because that represents the end of a journey. So number one, you're feeling, I'm happy that I've done it and I've achieved it. But then after you go through the, well done and so forth, you go, well, what's next?
Yeah. And there is a bit of a hollow feeling afterwards. You can go, I put all my heart and soul in, and
now it's all gone.
That's right. Now what? And it really does actually make you assess, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And that's something that all filmmakers have to face. And when the critics come out with their knives and start ripping a film apart, and then when you can't sell it to a streaming services or you get rejected from film festivals, you have to turn around and ask yourself, what am I doing? Why am I really doing this? And if you find, you're doing it for external validation, it's the wrong reason. You got to do it because you love it. You got to do it because you got something to say. You got to do it because you love the medium and you're passionate about it. And those are the filmmakers who make films that matter. Even the crummy filmmakers who make terrible movies, but because they're passionate, we even forgive them. Like the Tommy Wiseaus and the Ed Woods and so on, make dreadful movies. Neil Breen, they make the worst movies, but we love these movies in a strange way because at least there's a sincerity to the filmmaker. They're not doing it to make bad movies cynically or for a quick buck. They actually believe in this stuff and they're passionate about it.
Yeah,
I think that's what's
having to
missing.
tell the story, isn't it? I have to get this out to the world. I have to express myself.
Yeah, and that is I think for me, that's where I've that's what I had to come to. If I'm going to put this much effort into something, it better be something I care about and believe in, because that's the only thing that'll get me through all the pain, both making it and the other side of releasing it. The only thing that'll get me through the pain is if I believe in this thing. And that's why I've not taken, directing jobs from other people. I've had a few scripts thrown at me and direct this, direct that, and I read it and I go, well, there's nothing inherently wrong with this script in some cases, but it's just not something I'm passionate about. So therefore, I can't get behind that. I can't direct that. I can't. There's not enough here to sustain me. And their bank, what they were offering monetarily was not enough either. So
yeah. Now, talk to me before, you mentioned the writing process. You've obviously written not just the scripts of the movies that you've made, but you've obviously written a lot of things that haven't been made, and they're probably you've either gone, well, that may never happen, or I don't want it to happen, but I still want to work on these ones. What is your writing process? Because every writer has got a different process as far as ideas and formulas and so forth. What is it like for you? Do you get a first draft out very quickly, or do you spend your time on it? How is it that particular process?
It depends on the movie. Every script has its own weird journey, so there's really no formula. I tend to work better if I'm writing with somebody. So I now have a screenwriting partner, and we collaborate really, really well together. We're like two halves of a brain, and we pump out stories together, and we sort of build them together. So I find that writing with someone to bounce ideas off, who can write scenes and I can write over their work, they can write over mine. I find I find the collaborative aspect of screenwriting better. If it's just me and the blank page in front of me, very hard. Unless I'm adapting. You give me a novel, give me some history, I will adapt that very, very quickly, and I can punch a script out in a number of weeks if I'm adapting something, because I know what I have to write. But if I'm inventing something out of thin air from my mind, that's when the process can take a very long time.
It is more
challenging. That's why I get in Yeah, and that's why I get in a co-writer, so I can debate with them what's the right way to go. Because when you're looking at a script and you're going, well, what should I have the character do now? There's 1,000 choices, none of them wrong, but which is the way I should go? And you need to have that. I need to have that voice to debate that with, to find my way in the dark. So yeah, but if someone gave me a novel and said adapt that, and I was passionate about it, well, I just read the novel and adapt it. And I know, and I can make choices because my path is set. The novel is the way forward. So, I would prefer to adapt something or work with somebody. Those would be my processes of writing.
So
I've pumped scripts out in 6 weeks. Sometimes it's taking me 6 years. So there's really no telling how long a script will take.
No. So if you're writing a script, for example, where it's not based on anything historical or it's an adaptation of a book or anything, do you, for example, if you're creating characters, do you use people that you've met in your life, whether that be friends, family, colleagues, co-workers? Do you write a character and go, well, this particular person could be very much like Sally from The Office, and you'll use her attributes that you know to sort of make the character more real? Or do you just sort of try to make up a character away from people that you know?
I've never consciously made up characters based on people I know. I think subconsciously I've drawn on characteristics of certain people in my life, but that's more of a subconscious thing and something I usually spot after the fact. But I tend to just invent characters. I don't base them on people that I know. I don't tend to write from my own life or anything. I tend to read, or I tend to want to tell stories outside of my sphere. My personality, maybe other people's personality will come through, but it's never a conscious thing. Every writer, there's no right and wrong way of doing it. Every writer is going to have a different process. Some people find great inspiration from the people from around them, and will use Sally at the Office as I'll just write Sally at the Office. She'll be a great protagonist in my zombie film. That's fine. If that works, do it. Whatever gets you there.
Oh, of course. So tell me, you said you've worked with a writing partner. You either consciously or subconsciously draw things from your own life, whether that be people or circumstances. How did the cost come about as far as the idea for the movie and then creating that? Because I remember talking to my friend who's actually one of your stars at the time. He was telling me that your process behind the cost was you just wanted to make a movie. And it turned into, once again, a big thing, which is now streaming on Stan over in Australia. So talk to me about how that movie came about.
Well, once again, after Ben Hall, I spent several years trying to get the next film up. And project after project would fall over. I couldn't get the financing for them. And I again got to a place of frustration where I was, several years had passed since Ben Hall and I hadn't directed anything, and I really wanted to go and keep myself relevant and keep myself working. And Damon, the actor you mentioned, being a friend of mine, was encouraging and said, look, if you just go and write something very small, let's just go do something. He was keen to make a movie and to get into acting in a big way and put something on his CV that was good. And we wanted to work together. So he just said, write something and I'll come along and I'll do it with you. So I resisted. I was like, no more. No, I'm not doing this for free home movie stuff anymore. I didn't want to do it after Ben Hall. I thought, I'd done it. I don't need to do that again. I should be paid for this. And then, but the paying opportunities were not coming along. So it just became, well, it's the only way to do it. So I just once again dug down, wrote a script that I thought I could pull off, got a few loyal friends around me to rally around and just went off and made it. And fortunately, this time I did get some investors, so it wasn't my own money. I was able to get some investors and contacts that I built up over my career who were willing to support me. It was not a lot of money, but enough to get us going. And then once the film started and was really going along and we were getting scenes shot and so on, that's when more opportunities started opening up and we got to do post-production and we got a full, we got it to the end of we got to a full complete finish. But again, no one getting paid, everybody doing things for free or working on weekends, and it took over a year to shoot it. So it's, it was still another repeat of my of my cycle, which was like Twin Rivers, like Ben Hur, and now The Cost. They start as films that no one's asking for. I make them happen. Every time I go to somebody else and say, make this film happen for me or give me the money to make it, it never happens. So you have to go out and do it yourself. At least get the ball rolling yourself.
Mm. I remember there's this wonderful, there's a quote I remember hearing years ago, which was, tell the world what you want to do, but show them first.
Yep. Yes. Yep. That's a good quote. Absolutely. Another good one is stop waiting for permission. So many people ask me, how do I become a filmmaker? What do I do? And it's like, well, stop waiting for the grant to come in. Stop waiting to be selected to make a movie. Stop waiting. Go out and do it. If you really want to do it, go out and do it. It's
the thing is, you can do it creatively rather than with money as well. And that's what people, I think, also overlook. I mean, when we did Party Bus, for example, the thing was set in America, and I thought, well, how am I going to achieve this? And old school movie techniques, which people seem to forget these days. I printed a license plate backwards, put it on the bus. We shot everything normally, and when the entire movie was finished, I put an adjustment layer over the top, and I flipped every single piece of footage so that, yes, the actors would look backwards, but nobody knew that because it was consistent over the hour and a half you watch it.
That's right.
The bus has got the American side, the license plate is correct, and people go, is that going to work? And you go, of course it's going to work. And you do it creatively rather than having to hire in a bus that's on the other side of the road and permits and so forth. You can do things, and that movie, the biggest budget for me was in post. We shot that movie for practically nothing. I mean, I got hospitals for free, nightclubs for free, all that type of stuff, because you network, you use the contacts that you know, and then the contacts that they know. But the thing is, people, I think they go, I need a massive budget to make a movie, and it's just not the case, is it?
No, you need a massive budget to make certain kinds of movies. But I guess this is the thing that's going to separate the sheep from the goats, as they say. Can you still make a compelling movie without all those things? How creative are you? And if you can go and pull that off and figure that problem out, and you can make something that's compelling without all of that money and support, well, you're proving yourself. Because let's face it, if everybody had a Hollywood crew and a Hollywood budget, everybody could go out and make it. Because you've got everyone there doing it for you. You've got the machine. But if you can make a film without the machine behind you, well, this is how you forge your way as a filmmaker. You are proving to the world you are a filmmaker because you can do it without that stuff. And I think that's one of the most frustrating parts that I have found as a filmmaker is that, I've made now 3 features, very low budget and extremely low budget, but I've still made movies that are on streaming services, are being sold, have been on cinemas, have been released on DVD and Blu-ray. And I'm kind of going, look, see, I've done it. I can do it without the machine. So let me have access to the machine, please. So I can do this properly and do it better and bigger. But, the doors so infrequently don't open. So what do you do as a filmmaker when the doors don't open? You just got to go, well, I'm going to keep going. I just don't wait for permission. Make another film. And so I sort of live in that world of constantly going, well, how am I going to do the next one? If I assume that the machine won't get wheeled out for me on this one, or I'll just have to figure out how to do another one without it.
Well, I guess the logical and hopefully the way it will play out is, look, Legend of Ben Hur is on streaming services. It's on YouTube Movies. The Cost, of course, has just been, it's now on Stan in Australia. I'm not too sure where else in the world it is at the moment. But hopefully, the more that is out in the world, the more reviews it gets, the more eyeballs it gets. When you go off to people and say, well, hey, this is my next project and I did The Cost and I did Ben Hur and so forth, hopefully they go, oh, well, actually, they were really good movies. Yeah, we'll give you the investment or we'll give you a portion of the investment. So hopefully that part of the machine starts working as time goes on.
Yes, indeed. And I think it does. And I can see it starting to yield its fruit. Those movies, because I can have conversations with people that wouldn't have conversations with me had I not made those movies. So even though they didn't make me wealthy or anything, they're still viable enough that they're making it like I'm relevant. I'm a filmmaker that you should at least talk to. So I do get to have conversations. I do get people that rally behind me, and I have been able to get other opportunities So they have their value in other ways, and so hopefully, but the wheel turns slowly, the doors open slowly, and that's why you've got to be patient. It's one of the things. If you want to be a filmmaker, you've got to be patient, and you've got to be prepared to start at the bottom and work your way up. There's no shortcut to the top. And anyone who says, "Oh, yeah, but that filmmaker went from making his first short and he got launched and he got $100 million for his first thing," they're the exception to the rule. They're not the rule.
The rule is very rare. I mean, look at the guys who did Saw. They did that 12-minute short film for RMIT. But the thing is, one of them already had an agent in Hollywood, I believe.
That's right. That's right.
And it just so happened that their idea happened to just tick a box at the particular time where they go, wow, this is new, this could be a franchise, and boom. And as you say, that is rare because it doesn't happen to every filmmaker.
No, that's right. Otherwise, and every filmmaker's been trying to replicate it ever since, and they haven't been able to. It's just lightning in a bottle sometimes. They are the exception to the rule, but the rule is we all start at the bottom and we all crawl our way to the top, and it's slow, and most of us don't get there. And so as a filmmaker, you've just got to accept that you are probably going to be the rule, not the exception. And you've got a long slug ahead of you, and you've got to be patient, and you've got to never give up, and you've got to get better and better. Because that's the other thing. There's a lot of filmmakers out there who want to do this stuff. A lot of people who are really good filmmakers who can't get jobs. So you're competing against great filmmakers who, just like you, can't get a job, and they want investment and they want the next thing. So you really got to make sure that you got to step up your game. You got to make sure that what you're offering and what you're doing is competitive, and your skills are equal or better than those. So and you need to refine your craft and prove it. And that's why making short films and independent films and proving that you can do it and proving that you can make something sellable on the smell of an oily rag is just, it's only going to serve you better. So, yeah, go out and make stuff and stop asking for permission is my advice to filmmakers, because it's the only way you're going to get ahead. If I had stopped after Twin Rivers and said, well, I've made a short, I've made a feature, I'll sit and wait until someone finances my next one,
Nothing would have happened.
Now, nothing would have happened. I would have been a guy that made a movie once. So you've got to, and every time you get knocked down and the movie doesn't work, or it doesn't get as many screens as you wanted, or it didn't make any money, you dust yourself off and you go, all right, next one. Here we go again. Back on the crazy ride. So,
has there been times between projects, whether they be the long feature-length movies and the shorts, has there ever been times where you literally just say, why the hell am I doing this? It's not going to work for me, and you have that self-doubt, or have you just always brushed it off and kept moving forward?
Oh no! The dark times are always there, and the desire to give up and throw in the towel. I've come so close. And I've been so frustrated. I find that I don't struggle with self-doubt. Like, that thing where you go, oh, I'm not good enough, or, I've never had so much of that doubt, but this lack of faith in the industry, or just this feeling that I'm not being seen. No one cares about my plight or my films, or they can't see what I'm doing. Sometimes you have moments of doubt, like, I could have done better, and I look back on films like Twin Rivers and Ben Hur and go, yeah, I could have done better. But you just simply go, I can do better. Next one, I'll be better. So, and you learn. But the dark times for me are just like, this industry's too hard. It's too hard to break in. I just can't do it. How much longer can I hang in here? So it's less self-doubt, but more doubt about the industry itself than me. But yeah, so in the end, I've just had to go. The thing that gets me through and keeps me going is just going, well, this is what you really want to be doing. There's really nothing else in your life you want to be doing. So even though the industry sucks, even though it's really hard to get into, you kind of just got to keep going, because it's still better than, I don't know, whatever else it is I do with my life if I wasn't doing this. So yeah.
So tell me
it's the curse of being creative.
Oh yeah, you're not wrong. So what pays the bills between movies?
Look, anything you can get. Sometimes it's shooting a TV commercial. Maybe it's doing a bit of editing. Maybe it's taking a bit of part-time work in another part of the industry, or maybe doing something that's not in the industry at all. You pay it any way you can. So that's really how I do it. Sometimes my films will give me a little bit that'll get me through a short patch of time. But yeah, it's a bit of it's a bit part time for me at the moment. Filmmaking is sort of somewhere between full time and part time.
Mm-hmm.
But one day it'll be full time.
Wonderful. And look, I'm sure that's going to be the most amazing feeling for you, knowing that you've come from, doing something with your friends with a low budget camera, with no budget at all, into, being full-time, doing what you want to do and having them financed. And that brings me to obviously your next project, which I believe, is that in pre-production, or are you still writing the script for that? What's involved with this particular project?
Oh, that's, the next film is called The Guns of Mushu. And that is, I guess, it's somewhere between development and pre-production. We're certainly further along the line down the line than an idea, but we're not quite at full pre-production yet. It's a script that I didn't write. It came to me from a couple of other writers who sent it to me, thinking that it would be a project that I might be interested in, and they weren't wrong. It's a World War II Australian true story, and just a fascinating true story from that period, and instantly loved it. It's just my kind of genre. I've spent the last 6 months working with them to refine that script, and I've just started, pulling together a team of filmmakers, and I've also started sending it out to cast, and we've had a great reception and a lot of really terrific actors who want to be involved and who've attached their names to the project, and now we're throwing it out there to private investors and distributors and like that, and getting a lot of really great interest. And the snowball has started, and it's gathering. Every week it gathers more steam, gets more people involved, and we're barreling ahead to a potential start of shoot next year. About this time next year, we'll be shooting.
Fantastic! And is that going to be shot
in Australia? A lot of things happen. Yeah, in Australia. Yep, up in Queensland, doubling for Papua New Guinea.
Amazing.
So yeah, it's just we've got ourselves a good year to get this all prepared and all ready, all cast, all signed up, investors all stitched up, distributors signed up, the whole lot. So we're in the middle of that sort of process at the moment. So
and has that process come off the back of the cost and the success of the cost, or has it come from everything you've done?
I think it's really from everything I've done. There's no real direct connection to the cost. The filmmaker, the guys who wrote the script, have been keeping an eye on my work and thought it was something that I'd be good at, and they'd actually shopped it around to a number of other Australian filmmakers, much more successful filmmakers than me. I was kind of the last guy on the list, and they had taken it to all these people, and they'd all rejected it. They all said, "Yeah, it's not for me." They thought it was a good story, but none of them really, for whatever reason, didn't want to take the project on. And they were about to shelve it, and then one of the writers, because he knew me and was, sometimes we would talk about projects and so on. He just said, "Well, look, I've got this script. You want to have a read?" And he told me the subject matter, and I said, "Sure, I'll read that." And I fell in love with it. And then we spoke about it, and I got it, and he realized that I got what he was what kind of story, what kind of film he wanted to make, and then it was on. We're like, great, we get it, we click. I love the material. It's right up my alley. Boom. So it's sort of, I think the cost and then Legend Ben Hall, helped contribute to get my name on the list. But like I said, I was at the end of the list. So,
but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I remember there's this story out there where I think George Martin was the end of the list for the Beatles, and he gave them a chance. And I can't even remember why he chose to give them a chance. He may have even been pity more than anything else. But the thing is, that chance with that particular person turned into the biggest band the world's ever seen, who has inspired hundreds of thousands of musicians ever since. So sometimes being the last in line, it's a journey to success. You need to go through everything to get to the right part to take it further forward. And in this particular journey,
exactly.
You are that next step to take it further forward.
Yeah. And, there's plenty of cases, like you said, in history where I think Sam Raimi was not the first choice to direct the Spider-Man films back in the day. He was the last on a very long list of other filmmakers, but Sam Raimi was the guy, and he did such a great job with the original Spider-Man films, at least the first two. And it's just that's I sort of feel like the movie found its way to me. This is what I've got to do next, and it was meant to be for me. And those far superior filmmakers passed on it for whatever reason. We'll never know, but it was because it was meant to come to me. So it's a nice feeling when you go, it's actually wonderful that it came to me right before it was going to get closed down. And I was the one who, out of all those filmmakers, went, yes, I bloody see this. This is great. I love this. This is going to make a fantastic movie. And ever since then, the script just keeps getting more people excited. Every person we take it to and who reads it, they go, I love this. I want to be involved. So, yeah, it's just about finding the right people. It's about being there at the right time and being in a position where that can happen. And sticking with it and making all those independent films all these years has finally led me to the point where I do have this big opportunity looming ahead, where I'm making, a war movie, which is, right up my alley. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, but, that's it's looking good.
Fantastic. And of course, the thing is, as you said at the very beginning of this conversation, when you got into filmmaking at a young age, you were doing things like war movies. So now you've come full circle as a wonderfully, creative filmmaker and seasoned filmmaker, now having some wonderful, successful films out there. This is now your chance to do that childhood passion project, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I shot a 8mm, my first serious movie I ever made, where I went, no, I'm not doing silly things with my mates on weekends. I'm actually going to make a proper movie. Was a World War II drama set in Papua New Guinea. And I shot it here in the Adelaide Hills with my brother. And it was just about a guy wandering around the jungle trying to find a Japanese sniper. And I shot it all on 8mm, and I never actually completed it, but because I could never get the sound finished. And but that was actually my first attempt at a serious movie, was this movie called Kokoda about World War II. So now I'm telling almost exactly this story, The Guns of Mushu, is got so much in common with that first film that I wrote and made with my brother up in the hills. So, yeah, it almost is like coming right back to, 1998, where I went, hey, I'm going to go and make my own war film, and I'm going to take this seriously. So, yeah, it's funny how that's come around.
That's a really amazing and inspirational story, because if you look at a lot of the sort of self-help industry that's really sort of come into the mainstream over the past 20 years, people are basically saying that, like, if you take, for example, The Secret, they say, visualize what you want, put it out to the world, and then act as such. And I know in my life, there's been times where I've gone, I want to do this, I really want to experience this, I have this. And then one day you wake up and you go, hey, I've got that, or I'm doing that. And you may have had that intention a year ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. And I think it's that thing of, if you really want something, it'll eventually happen. You just got to keep moving forward. Yeah. But sometimes I think that if you keep focusing on it too much, yes, you can get to it. But I think if it can feel so far away sometimes, you can maybe be discouraged. But it is interesting how something can just be in the back of your mind. It never leaves. You're not consciously aware of it. And then one day you go, hey, I'm doing what I've always wanted. This is incredible. And this story for you, as you've just explained, it's practically the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And even Ben Hall, I as soon as Trinity was finished, I said, I want to make as a 13-year-old kid, I want to make an Ed Kelly movie. I want to make an Australian bushranger movie. And I was told over and over again, like, you'll never get this film made. You'll never make a Ben Hall film. Nobody wants a Ben Hall film. It's too expensive. It's impossible. And then one day, almost, I got it in motion, but it wasn't my intention to make this a feature. Before you know it, I'm like, holy, my second film was a Ben Hall movie. All the naysayers were wrong. It did become my second film. So if I had, and I guess it's because that's the intention. And I think that's what I've done with a lot of my work is I go out and I go, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to get to the end. But you just start acting and behaving as though it's a foregone conclusion. I'm going to make this film. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I haven't got all the answers. But once you start it and you have that intention, the films find their own way. and the right people are drawn to what you're doing. And that's why it's so important to never wait for permission. You've just got to go out and start, because it's almost like by doing that, you start attracting it all. And, that's certainly the case in my life. I've always wanted to, in fact, I remember one of the things that when I was sitting around going, after the cast, I was thinking, what am I going to do next? I really want to make another movie. And I said, gee, I'd love to make a war film. What do you really love? You love war movies. Gee, I'd love to make a film about the Second World War and Australia. And then I went, hang on, I remember that filmmaker. That filmmaker who had that script. He sent me that script a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't read it then. He was, oh, that's right. I've got one in my sitting on my computer, a World War II film sitting on my computer. I better read that. Boom, read it, and I was like, holy shit, this is great. So it's funny how it all comes around. These things are usually, you don't really have that kind of hindsight. It's only 20/20 in hindsight. When you're going through it, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, you're right. And look, I'm wrapping up this conversation. I think the thing that I think really sums up what you're talking about, this is something I experienced when I made my movie. If you look at the end result and you look at the bigger picture and you look at the enormity of everything, I've got to find the locations and do the casting and organize this and shoot day this and this and this. And there's all these things that can cloud your mind so much, because looking at that complete and big project is so daunting. But if you go, well, tomorrow I'm shooting this scene, so I need this cast, this location, and blah, blah, blah. And if you focus on it bit by bit by bit by bit, step by step by step, you just get there until one day you look back and go, hey, I've done it. I've shot the movie. I've achieved the goal, or whatever the case may be. If you just take the next step rather than looking at the huge big picture, which can sometimes put you off, the next step will always get you there if you just keep taking the next step.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got the patience and the drive, just start. Absolutely. I mean, I guess that's what I really learned from being a stop motion animator was patience. It's going to take me 24 moves to get a second of footage out of this. And I have to do 24 different things to get 1 second. And you just got to stick with it. And before you know it, it all comes to life. So, set your intention and start. And that's why in all these things, like Twin Rivers, Ben Hur, and The Cost, I had no idea how I was going to finish any of those films when I started. I just started them. And they get born of their own. They get born on their own. They come out. They push themselves out into the world despite all odds because you've started. So and people come to your aid, and people see what you're doing and they get passionate about it. And now you've got allies, and now your job is just that little bit easier. So just go out and start. That's the best advice I've got for any filmmaker is just go out and start. Forget your theory. Don't theorize about it, and one day when I get $1 million, I'll do it. No, go and see if you can do it for $1,000 and see where that gets you. Because you might find after spending that $1,000, you'll find another $1,000. So you can go a little bit further.
Great advice. Fantastic advice. Look, Matthew Holmes, thank you so much for being on the Identity Crisis podcast. It's been very insightful listening to what you have to say, and I really hope that any filmmaker out there can listen to what you've just said, look at your movies, and just go, you know what, I'm just going to go off and do it. So thank you so much for your time today.
No, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode. And remember, it's only an identity crisis if you choose to make it one. It's okay to not be okay. So speak up and talk to someone, or be the one that someone can turn to in their time of need. Don't forget to follow this podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show, send me an email at jnewtscomedy@gmail.com. I'm Jay Newts, and I'll see you next time.